What's your financial goal?
You want more money? Turn what you know into dough. Start hanging out with the people who have it. You create wealth on your own terms. It is not only your rights, but your duty to build wealth.
You are fiscally fabulous.
It's time to enjoy your legacy.
You're listening to Fiscally Fabulous with Dr. Teresa R. Martin, Esquire, a podcast that aims to provide you with the tools, guidance, and encouragement you need to build your wealth, enjoy your wealth, and leave a lasting legacy. Dr. Martin is an accomplished attorney, speaker, business consultant, and real estate strategist, an all-around self-made success who provides highly sought-after expert consulting in the creation, growth, and maintenance of generational wealth.
All right, so we getting ready to start with our Real Talk with Paul Bodley, who will give us all the juice about what's going on in legislation and what's not, and what we need to look forward to and what we don't. So Paul, take it away, sir.
Oh my goodness, I should have had my bottle of rum over here because this has been crazy the last few days, and I'm gonna pull a couple things that we talked about in Mentor because there was like some good stuff that I need to make sure everybody hears about that. But let me just start off with the big news is that right after we did our on Wednesday is that the House had that marathon budget session and they actually passed the kitchen sink bill. I refuse to use the name that they call it because it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard that grown people actually say. It's like something my 3-year-old would say. But they passed that kitchen sink bill with everything just included. And I don't know, Lorraine, did you see that they actually upped the salt limit to 40K?
I did see that, but it's not. Doesn't it still have to pass Senate? No.
Oh yeah. So that's
okay.
Okay.
But I did see that. I was like, oh well, isn't that nice?
Yeah, because originally it sounded like at the beginning of the evening that they weren't going to actually have anything increasing it off the 10K that it currently is, but they got that negotiation there. And I think what happened at the end is that they were so.
I think this was 30.
Well, they were talking about 30, but now they kicked it up to 40 because they was like so desperate to get this bill passed. And if you followed the actual vote, it only passed by one vote.
Right. Yeah, it was 215 to 214.
Yeah. And I wonder if they did have 2 Republicans who missed the vote, but we also had like 2 Democrats who also didn't vote because they had passed away in office. So it still would have been down to like a 1 vote majority. But the Senate is a different story, and they've already come out and said, look, there's like no way that these things are going to happen because the subtitle of this bill should be called the tax debt bomb, because one of the things they actually put into the bill was to increase the federal deficit by not just like a 1 trillion, 2 trillion, like get your kids' hands out and start counting. It's actually all the way up to like 4 trillion. And that's on the conservative side, because I've seen studies done by CBO, by various non-government entities, and they're putting the deficit from passing the spending bill with the tax cuts as high as $6 trillion of federal debt that will be added to the current debt total of $36 trillion. And what makes this even scarier is that for the last, I didn't know it was that long, but for the last 20 years, federal government actually has been spending more money than it's been taking in. Now, we've already seen the cuts to the IRS. So you've already knocked off the people who are responsible for bringing in your revenue. And there was the proposal under Biden administration that they were going to raise the effort to for people who are making over $400,000 to actually bring in more money from that. That's why they hired more IRS personnel to actually do those more complicated audits. But as soon as the current administration came in, they cut those new people. They're reducing the staff. The tax rate's probably going to go down for the higher earners. So studies have already shown that the less you make, the more you'll pay. So the current plan with the extension of this tax cuts, which I will believe in some form will actually pass the Senate. It might not look like the House version, but something it will pass. So for the average earner who makes less than, I think it was like $17,000, your tax bill will actually go up $800. But for anybody who at the top of the food chain, we're talking about the people who are in like the 0.01% of the population, you're going to see your tax bill decrease by $300,000. So yeah, we got that. So again, what's complicating things is at the same time, because of the increase into the amount of debt that's going to be generated, is Moody's, the last credit rating, and Coach will be happy when we're talking about credit ratings for companies, but even countries have credit ratings. So Moody's dropped the credit rating of the United States. So it just means that going forward, we're going to have to pay more money to people who buy debt bonds in order to finance all the spending that we're doing. So we're already starting to see this, and the bond market is already starting to show signs of like not wanting to like go down this road with the current administration, because there's suddenly now a question about the economic policy of the country, where the direction we're going, and how is this country going to realistically address its debt policy and debt plan. So we got that going on. On top of that, because of the uncertainty with the what's going on between the House and the Senate, and the tariff king who like just like wakes up and decides he's going to like impose tariffs on like different countries at the whim. Federal Reserve cannot lower interest rates because there's just too much uncertainty as a result. And I think Stan sent me an article about this. Mortgage rates, we're going to start seeing them hitting 7% and higher. So no reduction on the interest rates for the banks. That means that interest rates on mortgages and credit cards and auto loans are going to continue to go up on top of the tax cut that we're getting. Oh yeah. So in addition to all this like fun kitchen sink bill is because states have to pass their own funding bills, they kind of like just pass their own bills, spending bills, because they have to do that by law. They have to have their spending bills in place by the first, and New York State is like by April of the following year. So states have their spending plans in order, but it sounds like there's going to be even more cuts and more expenses coming down the pike from the this kitchen sink budget, because it's been you might think it's related, but there's like push more of the Medicaid expenses back to the states. It's going to be the push to push more of the FEMA disaster and recovery to the states. There's going to be more of a push to pass the cost of open unit services to the states without having the federal government backing you up with that limit in the spending, or taking in the taxes from a bunch of places that are not having as many higher costs and offsetting it to the states that actually need it. So it's going to be interesting to see if like some of the blue states who generally send more money to the federal government than they receive, if they're going to continue doing this, because what's the alternative? That the the federal government is going to sue the states for non-payment? That could be very interesting, and I'd like to see how that gets enforced. If they're going to send the army into like Albany with a bag of money to collect all the past due money that the state owes on their federal taxes, we shall see. So, because of all this uncertainty, we're starting to see some fluctuation in the housing market as well. So this is kind of funny, is that, and I want to go back to executive orders in a minute too, but there was like one executive order that was signed very early on in the administration where, and it wasn't an executive order, it was like more like a proclamation, is the president directed HUD to come up with a plan to make housing more affordable. But that was like 90 days ago, so we haven't heard anything about that. So the only thing we've heard from HUD as far as like a policy initiative is focus on deregulation, which I'm not sure how that's actually going to help build more affordable housing. And there's this back and forth debate on whether they're going to end the conservatorship of government owning Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. The people who actually do the mortgages and generate and hold a lot of the mortgages for both the single family and the commercial side on the multifamily side. As a result, we're starting to see slowdown in new housing starts. But it's kind of funny. It's like existing housing starts.
Welcome to RIA NYC, where eager to learn entrepreneurs become wealthy and happy to teach investors. When life gives you lemons, draft a business plan. Call your girls and build an empire of lemon-inspired beverages. Because a real investor understands that in these times, you have to have more than one gig. It's not simply lemonade anymore, boss ladies. Nothing happens until you decide to change your life. But when you do, make more than just lemonade. Oh, and do it in great company. Call us today and build your empire.
Housing sales have declined. New housing sales have actually gone up. And that's because we're seeing a lot of housing builders throwing a lot of incentives to try to get people to buy properties, while even though the mortgage rates are still on the high side. So we'll see how long these incentives start. But at some point, probably in the next month or two, all sales are going to be depressed. And we're starting to see a little bit of that on the housing pricing as well. Housing pricing is starting to decline or staying stable. It hasn't risen as much as it has over the last few months. So we're starting to see sales come down, inventories coming up, and the difference between people who can afford to buy a house versus the people who can only afford to rent is the gap is widening. I was just reading a study by Redfin where it's showing that the average income to buy a house now is $116,000 annual, but to rent you're at around 60,000. So we're also starting to see that rents are starting to stabilize and not rise as much as they have in the past. And what continues to plague people who want to buy is insurance, on top of all the other uncertainties that come with the federal government passing costs down to the states. So insurance, the federal government has not done anything or has any kind of proposal or policy or planning, not even anything, an outline of how they're going to get insurance rates to come down and make it more affordable and increase the coverage of properties that people buy. So I'd really like to see where that's going to go. So I'm just reading my chicken scratch notes here. But yeah, that's the two of the bigger issues that we're starting to see with people buying properties. So got two more things forgot to mention about the executive order. So it's interesting because I was actually tracking the executive orders signed by the current president for the day he took office in January 20th up until now. So I had a little gap in between. So there were over 120, there's supposed to be 120 executive orders that were signed. And a lot of these executive orders were really more proclamations. A lot of them clearly violates constitutional law. But when I went back to check the executive orders, I found that some of them had been scrubbed from the official White House government's website, which is very interesting because they got rid of the evidence that they were kind of making unlawful laws and proclamations, trying to pass it off as actual laws. And the difference between an executive order and a congressional law and bill that's passed through Congress is the executive order only lasts as long as the current president is in power. So the next president can come along and totally undo everything that the current guy is doing. And this happened in the past with happened to Biden, happened to Obama, even the 45, it happened to him when Biden came into office. And there's been about 120 or so executive orders signed, and there's been 200 lawsuits to challenge all these executive orders. So they're just being tied up in court. And surprisingly, there's only been 5 bills signed into law, one of them being the spending extension that they need to sign to keep the federal government from shutting down for fiscal year 2025. So that's very interesting. And the fact that a lot of this stuff is coming, the way that the current administration is working is everything is coming from the top down. So when you have a sprawling entity like the federal government, you hire the best people. You want to put people in positions who know about the policy, who can create policy that will send it to the executive to sign off on, and that's the direction that the government's going to go. Everything is coming from the top down. So we have one guy whose brains were waffled, just like making pronouncements on his like social media platform. Everybody's getting their marching orders from that, and then they're just enabling those orders, whether they make sense or not. So what a way to run a country. But let's go local for a sec here. And I have two things on the for the local front. So I don't have a whole lot for other locations, but I did want to mention that June 24th is New York City's primary date, and we have 12 candidates who are running for New York City mayor, and we have the voting choice. So we'll see, like there might be a kind of like a mayoral vote off if one person doesn't get enough the minimum requirements of votes. It looks like the front runner right now is former Governor Andrew Cuomo, and you know it's at least he's an experienced executive who can come in and run a government, and he was a 3-term governor before he had to resign, so he can actually do policies. So what his actual policy is going to be, I'm still researching that. The last thing I wanted to just leave everybody with is also in the next month, the New York City Rent Guidelines Board is going to meet. So they've released the last of their research documents for the to justify the rent increases for rent controlled and rent stabilized apartments. And some of the interesting things that they came up with is some stats here. So there actually has been an increase of about 15,000 new properties, with a decrease of they've only had to demolish maybe like 800 units. And the vacancy rate in New York City is hovering at a mind-boggling like 1.4%. So building in New York is very, very tight. And anybody who thinks they're going to invest or kind of like do any kind of like investing in New York City, doing kind of wholesaling investing in New York City, good luck with that. And that's a lot of things I wanted to kind of mention. Yeah. So stop there and just start answering your questions.
That's a lot.
Jade here hired an online freelancer to help her file her LLC. What she did not know was that she had to file her quarterly taxes, where to find her registered agent, or even why she needs one. If only someone had told her about the law offices of Teresa R. Martin, PC. Teresa and her team of exceptional quality professionals make it their business to establish great business. Let's schedule a call to make sure you are operating within the law. martinlegal.com.
So one of the questions I have is based on what is your opinion as far as the investigations that are being brought up for the former governor now running for mayor?
I think it goes nowhere. They're trying to do the same playbook on Cuomo that they did for Adams, in that I think if they can get enough dirt on him, that they can actually bring him into the fold, because you see that once the charges were brought against Adams and then they were dropped, so then like Adams is showing up with like the ICE czar on TV shows and saying like, oh yeah, he's letting us go, the ICE people go into the prisons and check the citizenship of the people in the prison, at Rikers and the detention centers. So I think it's all just like, this DOJ definitely has been weaponized, and I find that kind of funny because the House does have a committee on federal government weaponization, and it's like, oh, you guys just like need to look over here right now, because you guys are clearly weaponizing government at every single level, because this is what the whole current government administration is all about, is weaponization and retribution, and that's all it is. You pick an agency, I'll tell you exactly how they're using it to go after somebody else. Between big law, between Harvard, and then I thought it was an official thing, but there's rumor, it hasn't been substantiated yet, but there's rumor that one of the reasons why current president's going after Harvard and Columbia and Stanford so hard is that they turned Barron down when he applied.
No.
So it hasn't been official yet. That's just rumor out there, but it would be so like current guy to go after these agencies. But the fact that they've turned the DOJ into this legal watchdog, he calls them his lawyers. They're not his lawyers. These are the people's lawyers. They're supposed to be defending the citizens of the United States. And we got nothing right now for the next 3.5 years.
And it's the same thing that I always keep saying, as far as, just get your business right. You really have to, these 3 years is really going to be telling. You really have to, get your stuff in order, work on your finances, make sure, you're set up, credit wise, because what he's going to be doing from the SBA to everything else is really going to be hard, for you to navigate, these waters. So I really would encourage everyone within the sound of my voice to really take heed as to what's going on. When you think that legislation doesn't, come to your backyard, it's actually coming to your front door. And you really have to understand what's going on from a federal level in order for you to be able to, secure yourself on a local level. So that's one of the things why I think Real Talk is so important. And ask your questions. Like, whatever you don't understand, ask, because, there is everybody's confused. Nobody knows what's going on except for the people, at the top. And half the time he changes his mind. He don't even know what's going on. So I'm really, like you said, Paul, you can't prepare for these sessions because everything changes. What you prepare for, on Friday, by the time you get to Tuesday, it's changed already. So you can't even use that. You know what I mean? So we just got to take it day by day. So with that, anybody got any questions? We got things going on. We got the census came out in March, I think, where the new single family houses, I think it was March 2025. Yeah, I think they did that, where, they were seasonably adjusted. They have, they said that it was 7.4% higher. It was 724,000 was the annual rate. And it was 7.4% higher than February. And so what's going on, right? So we got to kind of figure out, what is the median buy rate in the areas in which you're looking to invest, right? So then you're looking at tax liens, or you're looking at tax deeds. You still have to know what the market is holding up. We have prop stream coming up next month to deal with, how do you really do all of these different, lists that you can kind of look at and sort through and try to get your market data and your property data and all that.
So much has changed in the world, and reasons for legal counsel are many. With the law offices of Teresa R. Martin, PC, you walk in looking for solutions, but when you walk out with a growth mission and a support network. Get an attorney in real estate and business who knows and understands how to eliminate debt. Teresa has built an empire designed to grow businesses and strengthen communities. martinlegal.com.
Yeah, what's going on? What's going on, guys? What questions you have? Any questions at all?
I wrote the question because I wrote the question because I know my signal is kind of jumpy. It's not really good.
Okay.
But besides the fence, what are they, this money that they're getting from us through our federal tax and all like that, where's this money going? If they're cutting all these other programs and trying to push everything else over on, onto the state level, what do they, what do they need all this money for? If it's not happening, if nothing's, if they're not funding anything, and then eventually that's going to wear on the states, and then all of a sudden, the state taxes, their rates are going to rise and all like that. So where are we going with this?
So
they just hold this.
Total blatant. They won't say it, But the whole justification for the cuts to the federal government, to the staffing, to the agencies, is to fund the tax cuts for the wealthy. That's it. Plain and simple. That's all it is in a nutshell. They can't just do a blanket increase and just allow for the tax cuts to become permanent without paying for it, because it would add too much money to the federal deficit, and that would be beyond the congressional rules. So they have to offset it. They can only go up with the budget reconciliation process that they're using, where they can just go by and get like simple majority, which means that the Senate Democrats can't use the filibuster to slow down or stop the bill from processing through the Senate. All they need is, and because the Republicans have the majority in the Senate, means simple vote. All the Republicans show up and vote, this bill passes. So all of this is just to offset enough of the cuts to make this bill go through and provide tax cuts for the wealthy. That's it.
I like what Lorraine said, and go to help towards the wall.
But you know, listen, if you insist on trying to get blood from a stone, you know, eventually, you know, we're going to pick up those stones, you know, and start throwing them back and all that. Where, you know, this is
where you have to be careful, because this is the mindset of the current administration. So, you know, he's already like creating, like June 14th is supposed to be like the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the Army. We all know it's really for his birthday. He's always wanted a military parade, and he's going to have like this gigantic parade going through DC for his birthday. You know, the U.S. Army beat back. So
$40 million later, right?
Yeah, that's 40 million. I think it's actually going to be more than that, because at one point it was 90 million, but I think it's going to be a lot more expensive. They're just like cutting back the cost or not telling everybody what the real cost is. But I say all this to say that he's already got plans to use the military, that if there's any kind of like uprising because people are not satisfied with the direction, even if people protest, using their constitutional right to assemble and protest, to use their voice to complain about things that are going on, you know, he'll try to use that as some justification to get the military out, because he's already got an executive order out there to like test to see if he can actually use the military to enforce law enforcement within the United States against United States citizens.
Martial law.
And then he's going to declare some type of like martial law, which then he can suspend all types of like constitutional laws that we enjoy, like habeas corpus, due process, and even the suspension of elections, so that if this was to happen before the midterms, who's to say that we don't actually have midterm elections? Now that's stuff that's like really, really deep stuff that like you would read in a George Orwell novel, but that's the world we actually live in.
Yes. Yeah, that's, you know, that's pretty scary.
So the biggest thing, Paul, you know, like what Stan mentioned, it is scary. And, you know, but now from a standpoint of where we sit right now, what are the things that we need to be, what are the things that we need to consider and start doing to be actively participating and activating the pushback, right? So like what do we need to consider right now in the positions that we are in right now? What do we need to do?
But one of the things I'm starting to do is, I'm starting to see a lot of this, is like a lot of the nonprofit people who are in the housing industry are starting to gather people together, and they're writing like white papers and creating like take action policy manuals for people to actually step forward and reach out to the elected officials and register their complaints, and really push the people, even though they're in the minority, push the Democrats to be more vocal in their opposition to like some of these draconian policies. From a business and financial point of view, you said it right away. It's like we need to focus on cleaning up our financial spreadsheets, so to speak, and we need to focus more on working within ourselves, forming local partnerships within ourselves, and not relying so much on the federal government. There are people who used to use the SBA funding. Don't rely on that anymore, because staffing has been cut. The funding is about to be cut, because there's this whole thing that, you know, everything that the federal government does is a handout and people don't earn it, which is like totally false and just like some uber conservative, like, I won't say a word I was going to use, but like some uber conservative like fantasy that they've always entertained. But that's the direction that we should be going. And as we form these partnerships, we should then, I said it before, and I'm just echoing what the session that you led a couple months ago during one of the general sessions on creative financing. We really need to focus on creating understanding creative financing and not relying so much on traditional banking, because it's not going to be there. As interest rates start to go up, as we start to see like a more softening in the housing market where people can't afford to pay their mortgages, and now they're going to have the foreclosure rate's going to start to go up. Banks are going to start to tighten their lending practices. So we need to be prepared for that before that actually happens. And we need to be our own bank, period.
And I was going to, absolutely, Rosewood. I was acting, and really, Rosewood was great, but the Black Wall Street was awesome. And I really, in my heart, and I think that was always in my heart. I've always pushed it so hard, right? Because, I just know that if we really, really, really took the time to really mind our own business, right? Literally, right? Mind our own business, there's so much gold that can, that can come from that, and then the monies that you make, you can actually now lend it, right? So you can be a private money lender, right? Because my ultimate goal is, how long will it take if you think about where you are right now? How long will it take for you to become an accredited investor, right? Because we all know that the end of the rainbow, that pot of gold is always set for the accredited investor, right? All the great opportunities, all the things that are going on is open to the accredited investor, right? And so the question now is, whether you want to participate or not, don't you want to be a part of that club, right? Don't you want to be an accredited investor? And so I'm challenging everyone. You're not going to get there if you're not minding your own business. So even if you are an investor who are not looking for partners, you're not looking for private money, you're not looking for any of that, build up your own assets so that you can become an accredited investor. If you have your job, your income, right? You can, then be classified as an accredited investor, right? So you just got to make sure that you are hitting over that $200,000 mark and, you're doing what you need to do. But the question always remains, do you want it? You know what I mean? Because, that was like always back in the day. Everybody talked about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and what's wrong. And, that's not right. The question right now is, you have been, what do you call it when they call you out? They calling you out. What are you going to do? Most of the times they do things because they know you ain't going to do nothing. They can, because you ain't going to do nothing. All you're going to do is complain, and you're not really going to do anything. Not here, not now. What do we do? And Paul said it. We need to really start building, the infrastructures internally, not relying on federal. Okay. And, making sure that creative financing is part of it. And then private money too. If you have monies in your self-directeds and things of that sort, and you want to lend it out, as long as it's backed by real estate, first position, hopefully, then that would be something that you might want to, look at as well. But get that credit right. You know what I mean? We really have to, there's no time to wait. There's no time to wait. So if you are under a 720, 740, 760, you got work to do. All right, you have work to do because they keep moving it up. Remember back when 720 was what they were looking for? 760 is what they're looking for. 2 weeks ago was 760. So, they just keep moving the cheese.
I got one more for you.
Did
Did you hear about this one? One of the orders that they did was to reinstate the collection of student loans, but they didn't tell people about that. So people missed the payment and saw their credit score drop by 100 points overnight.
Because it was May 5th, I think. It was something. Yeah, it was something in May. Yeah, so I'm hoping that people are paying attention to that, because that student loan stuff, man. Listen, that's what I told my kids. I was like, I don't take out parent loans, but nobody. I got my own debt. You gonna have yours. Okay, I'm not taking out none of that nonsense. Okay, because that's the worst. And so, but I did what I did say. Okay, don't judge me. I did say you take your loan out. I help you pay it for the first year till you get you a job. Then you pay your own thing. But I ain't taking no parent loan, no co-signing loan, no nothing. I got my own debt. You get yours if that's what you want. Because when you give it to them, they don't do what they need to do. Now I'm in debt for your stuff. And so we got to work on the student loan. We got to work on the credit. We got to work on building the business foundations. Make your business sellable. Whether you want to sell it or not, just build it to sell. Whether you sell it or not, that's how you want to build all of your businesses, all your verticals, right? And no more procrastination. Because every day you procrastinate, I'm going to get this done next week or whatever. Somebody already coming up with the idea and they're already marketing. So, so you're going to be left, again, so yeah. So this is important, Paul, what you shared. It's really scary out there. I know we have the information and I know we're armed with it, but really just doing the marching orders, like what we need to do from here to just, start implementing all these things that you're saying to help us insulate. And I think what you said is just build together, start building. And thank you guys so much. Thank you, Paul. And guys, I guess we'll be ready for June. Let's get it together. Let's get it together. Have a good one. Stay fiscally fabulous, everybody. Bye.
This has been Fiscally Fabulous with Dr. Teresa R. Martin, Esquire. If you would like to learn more on how you can build generational wealth and leave a lasting legacy, go to www.enjoyyourlegacy.com and be sure to subscribe. Thank you for listening. Until next time.